The city had been alive 3 days ago. Markets, children, smoke from cooking fires. Now it was ash and silence and the sound of horses. You're standing in the middle of it, and the only reason you're still breathing is because you made a decision, a fast one, the kind that changes who you are forever. You submitted. This is what most people get wrong about the Mongol Empire. They picture the violence and they stop there. The raids, the bodies, the cities wiped off the map. And yes, all of that was real. All of that happened on a scale that is genuinely hard to wrap your head around. But here's what nobody talks about. Millions of people didn't die. Millions of people lived inside this machine, traded inside it, raised children inside it. Some of them thrived inside it. And what it took, mentally, psychologically, at the level of your core identity, to do that, is one of the most unsettling survival stories in human history. Because surviving under Genghis Khan didn't just require toughness. It required you to become someone else entirely. Let's go back to that moment. The city gates open, the Mongol army rides in, and you have about 30 seconds to signal which category you fall into. Resistance or submission. That's it. That's the whole decision tree. And the Mongols made sure you understood the consequences of each option before they ever arrived, because that was the strategy. They sent messengers ahead deliberately. Surrender now, integrate into the empire, and you live. Fight back. And what happens to your city becomes a message for the next city down the road. This wasn't random cruelty. It was a psychological system, calculated, precise, designed to break the will of entire populations before a single sword was drawn. And it worked, over and over and over again. So let's say you made the smart call. You submitted. The soldiers ride past you. You're alive. Now the real test begins. The first thing you had to learn, and learn fast, was how to normalize fear. Not overcome it, not hide it. Normalize it. Let it become the background noise of everyday life, the way traffic is background noise to someone living in a busy city. Because fear under the Mongol Empire wasn't occasional. It was constant. The threat was always there, embedded in the structure of everything. One wrong word to the wrong person, one perceived act of disloyalty, one rumor reaching the wrong ears. Psychologists who study people living under extreme authoritarian systems find the same pattern every time. The ones who survive longest aren't the ones who feel no fear. They're the ones who learn to function inside it. To make decisions, build relationships, raise families, all while the fear is running quietly underneath everything like a current you never fully escape. The Mongols understood this without needing a psychology textbook. They maintained just enough unpredictability to keep that current alive. Punishments weren't always consistent. Loyalty wasn't always rewarded in obvious ways. You could do everything right and still find yourself in danger because someone above you had made an enemy. That unpredictability was a tool. It kept you permanently slightly off balance. And people who are slightly off balance don't organize rebellions. But fear was only the first layer. What sat underneath it was something harder to manage. Under Genghis Khan, loyalty wasn't just expected. It was the entire architecture of survival. And it operated in every direction simultaneously. You were loyal to your immediate commander. Your commander was loyal to his general. His general was loyal to the Khan. And that chain, you did not break it. Not visibly, not even privately if you could help it, because the empire had eyes in places you wouldn't expect. The Mongols used a system where communities were held collectively responsible for individual acts of betrayal, which meant your neighbor's disloyalty could become your death sentence. And everyone knew it, which meant everyone watched everyone. Which meant the surveillance didn't even need to come from above. It came from the people standing right next to you. That's a particular kind of psychological pressure that does something specific to a person over time. It makes intimacy dangerous. Because the person you trust most is also the person whose mistake can kill you. So you learn to love carefully, to share carefully, to be present in your relationships while keeping a part of yourself permanently guarded. Historians who study survivor accounts from populations that lived under Mongol rule describe this pattern consistently. A kind of warmth on the surface and a cold, careful core underneath. Not because these people were dishonest, because survival required the split. And that split had a cost that took generations to show up. The second mental shift required was emotional suppression, and this one ran deep. Grief was dangerous. Not because the Mongols punished crying, but because grief leads to anger, and anger leads to action, and action under this system leads to death. So you learn to process loss quietly, quickly. You buried your people, you acknowledged what happened, and then you kept moving. There's a term in modern trauma psychology, adaptive suppression. The brain's ability to lock difficult emotions in a kind of storage so the person can keep functioning in a dangerous environment. It's not denial. The person knows what happened. They feel it. But they've learned to defer the full weight of it until a safer moment. For most people living under the Mongol Empire, that safer moment never really came. So the storage filled up, quietly, across years. And what that does to a person, to a community, to the children raised by those people, is something that doesn't show up immediately. It shows up a generation later in the way people relate to each other, in the emotional distance that gets passed down without anyone meaning to pass it down. You can survive almost anything if you're willing to defer the cost. The bill just comes later, and someone else usually pays it. But here's the part that genuinely unsettles me. Some people didn't just survive this system, they rose inside it. Merchants who learned to move goods across the Mongol trade routes, the Silk Road operating at a scale it had never reached before, built real wealth. Administrators who proved their competence were kept, promoted, trusted with genuine responsibility. Skilled craftsmen were relocated rather than killed because the Mongols understood their value. The empire wasn't just a machine of destruction. It was a machine of ruthless, brutal pragmatism. And if you had something useful to offer, and you were smart enough to make that usefulness visible, there was actually room for you, which creates a deeply uncomfortable psychological reality. To rise inside a system built on violence and fear, you had to stop seeing it as a system built on violence and fear. You had to reframe it. Tell yourself a story about order, about opportunity, about the stability that came after the initial destruction. You had to make peace with what you were part of. That's not unique to the Mongol Empire. That's a human pattern that shows up everywhere power concentrates and people have to decide how to live inside it. The reframe that lets you function also lets the system continue. And knowing that, and doing it anyway, is what identity reshaping actually looks like from the inside. So what does all of this mean? You're sitting here, in comfort, watching this. And the distance between your daily experience and what these people navigated every single day is almost impossible to measure. But here's what stays with me. These weren't exceptional people. They weren't built differently. They were ordinary human beings who got handed an extraordinary set of conditions and had to figure out, fast, who they needed to become to make it through. The fear normalization, the careful loyalty, the emotional deferral, the identity reframe. None of that came from strength in the way we usually talk about strength. It came from something quieter, something more honest. It came from the simple, brutal, very human decision to still be here tomorrow. And the question that lingers, the one I can't fully shake, is whether the version of yourself required to survive something like that is still really you, or just whoever you had to become.